Thank you. Dr. Thomas.
Chairman Goodlad, Ranking Member Conyers, Subcommittee Chairman Backus, and Subcommittee Ranking Member Cohen, and members of the committee, thank you for the chance to testify on the effects of regulation on low-income households today. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. My research shows that regulation has unintended consequences that are particularly detrimental to low-income households. These unintended consequences are as follows. Regulation of health and safety and the environment often represents the preferences of high-income households, but it increases prices and lowers wages for all households. As a result, low-income households are forced to pay for the mitigation of risks that are not their priorities. In this sense, regulation can have a regressive effect. Because of this regressive effect, it should be subject to a cost-benefit test that takes into consideration potential regressive effects. So let me explain that in a little bit more detail. According to the CDC, the top 2 causes of death in the United States are cancer and heart disease. And we spend billions of dollars every year to try to privately mitigate those risks. In doing so, we have some effect, at least, on the risks that we face. Just to give you a point of reference, in 2002, the mortality risk associated with heart disease was roughly 19 in 10,000 of population. So 19 individuals died from, 19 out of 10,000 died from heart disease. Regulation, on the other hand, often addresses risks that are significantly lower. There are numerous OSHA rules that address occupational safety, but work-related fatalities only happen with a frequency of roughly 0.36 in 10,000 of population, so much lower. When people make private decisions to reduce risks, they start out with the highest risks that affect them the most. That just makes sense. As your income increases, you will also consider lower probability risks. And what that means is then ultimately that high-income households will already be concerned with low-income risks, with low probability risks, but low-income households are still dealing with high probability risks that affect them the most. When regulation is directed at small probability risks that are costly to mitigate, it therefore represents the preferences of the wealthy. But it applies to everybody regardless of income. So that means everybody has to pay the higher prices. Because low-income households have limited resources, that means that regulation forces them to transfer resources from mitigating high probability, high priority risks to the mitigation of low priority, low probability risks. Essentially, they have less money to spend on the mitigation of risks that actually matters to them because they're forced to pay for the priorities of higher income households. Take, for example, the 2005 removal of the essential use designation for CFC as a propellant in medical inhalers by the FDA. CFC is a greenhouse gas, and it was regulated because of its consequences on the ozone layer. Medical inhalers that use CFC had previously been exempted from the 1987 Montreal Protocol, which phased out ozone-depleting substances. And the Montreal Protocol was actually pretty successful at achieving its goal. The World Meteorological Organization estimated in 2002 that the ozone layer is expected to return to pre-1980 levels by the middle of the 21st century. Now, that same research report also pointed out that additional reductions in CFC emissions would produce only small improvements, and that non-industrial sources of CFC emissions were insignificant. So basically what the WMO research indicated was that the benefits of banning CFC as a propellant in medical inhalers were uncertain and at best negligible. The cost of the ban to consumers were real and significant, however. The prices of asthma inhalers, for example, have roughly tripled since this rule has been implemented. And that affects several million Americans, and low-income households in particular, you can imagine, are affected by this a lot. So when regulation is directed at small risks that are expensive to mitigate, it can have regressive effects on household income, and low-income households have fewer resources on hand to address their private, high-priority concerns as a result of that. This unintended consequence of regulation is real, but it's foreseeable, which is why it's important for agencies who are tasked with public welfare to consider the regressive effects of the regulations that they're considering and to analyze the costs and benefits before they make decisions that affect people. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you.